Are African presidents deliberately damaging the reputations of African countries and then blaming the West while depending on that same West for survival? For example, when Paul Biya's style of governance raises fears about political transition in Cameroon, and Tinubu's past continues to raise questions about identity and public trust, who should bear responsibility for the resulting fears of instability, conflict, and a poor business environment? Welcome to Africa's Uncomfortable Questions, brought to you by Beyond Africa. This is a platform where we address the issues many people avoid, issues often hidden behind political speeches, nationalism, Pan-Africanism, and fear of criticism. Some would even say political correctness. Tonight, we are talking about trust in public management as a cornerstone of good governance, a catalyst for foreign direct investment in Africa, and a foundation for a peaceful, stable, sustainable, and prosperous country. Let us look at Cameroon, where Paul Biya has been in power for more than 4 decades. He is 93 years old. His long absence from the country recently raised serious concerns about his health, the future of the country, and what would happen if he bows out. The question is not only whether Paul Biya is well or is going to bow out soon. The bigger question is, can Cameroon's institutions continue to work properly without Paul Biya? Simply because it's a question. Are African countries being held back mainly by outside? This type of nervousness caught up with Zimbabwe when Mugabe was 93 years old, weak, frail, and refused to organize peaceful elections to ensure a transition. He was eventually forced out of office through a coup d'etat. His regime, however, continued to operate, not as he wanted it, not as the citizens wanted it, because the citizens wanted that regime out. In any case, in a normal country, the courts should work, government ministries should operate normally, and the constitution should be very clear about management, power transfer, and political transitions. The people should know who takes over if the president cannot continue. But when a country's future depends too much on one person, that country becomes weak, whether we like it or not, whether we hide it or not, whether we say it or not, that country becomes weak. And that affects foreign investment and the country's reputation internationally. And it is even worse when people are afraid to discuss about succession. It shows that the system is not prepared for the future, or the system has designed how that future is going to be. These raises issues about succession. And when there is no clarity about succession, there is danger in the horizon. Discussing succession is important because it creates a degree of certainty. Then there is Nigeria, where President Bola Tinubu is expected to seek a second term in January 2027. But questions about his identity, his academic record, and his past continue to follow him. There are ongoing disputes in the United States involving requests for old FBI records and Drug Enforcement Administration records connected to the sitting president of Nigeria, Bola Tinubu. Before anything, let us be clear. Questions and allegations are not the same as proof. Every person deserves fairness and facts must matter. But in the middle of all these, public trust also matters. Because a president who says he's been elected by the citizens should ensure and guarantee the citizens' confidence in his person and in the office he holds. When records are disputed, hidden, delayed, or difficult to understand, or the subject tells the court not to release those documents because they would endanger lives, it is only legitimate for people to ask questions. And when a president cannot easily clear up doubts surrounding his background, he weakens confidence, not only in himself, but in the presidency of that country and the reputation of that country abroad. As I say, This is often bigger than one man. It is about whether African leaders understand that public office requires public trust, trust from citizens and trust from the international community. This takes us down to Ghana. In Russia this week, Ghana's foreign minister, Samuel Ablakwa, argued that the international financial system is rigged against Africa. That argument deserves to be taken seriously. African countries often pay more to borrow from the international market. They are judged more harshly by international leaders. They have less power in global institutions that make decisions affecting Africa's economies. So yes, on its face, Africa faces unfair treatment in the world. But that cannot be the end of the story, because external unfairness does not excuse internal failure in African countries. For example, the West did not cause every secret deal that African governments sign with others to misuse public money. The West also did not tell African leaders to weaken the courts, control elections, silence journalists and critics, or stay in power for as long as they want until their feet cannot move them any further. The West also did not create shady deals for the sale of Africa's raw materials in the black market, or any system where people do not know how public money is collected, processed, and spent. All we know is taxes are collected, loans are raised from the international market. How the money is spent, no one knows. African leaders, therefore, have made these choices themselves. Africa's reputation is a direct consequence of governance in Africa. And African governments cannot ask the world to see their countries as stable, trustworthy, and good places to invest, while at the same time, African leaders refuse transparency at home. Africa deserves fair treatment from the rest of the world, but fair treatment from outside must go together with accountability in Africa. A country's reputation is not built by slogans, speeches, or blaming foreign countries for every problem. It is built when people can examine public records. It is built when leaders answer difficult questions. And it is built when the law applies to the president and other powerful people just as it applies to ordinary citizens. So tonight, on Africa's Uncomfortable Questions, we are asking one question. Are African countries being held back mainly by outside forces? Or are some African leaders themselves destroying the trust, credibility, and strong institutions their countries need to succeed? For Africa's Uncomfortable Questions, brought to you by Beyond Africa, I am Ngalim Bernard. Kindly like and share the live stream with your networks. Invite others to come listen to these difficult questions and the difficult answers that my guest would provide. Africa's future depends on honest, transparent, and careful Africans. Join me as I introduce my guests to you. Before I introduce my guests to you who are still joining the studio right now, I want us to have a deep dive or a more simple, straightforward conversation, especially about what we witnessed over the week in Cameroon, for example, where Paul Biya returned from a brief, short, but long stay in Geneva, where he spent almost 80 days. During the 80 days, there were conflicting information from the government's side as well as from his party's side. But one question that nobody focused on was, what are the long-term consequences of such leadership style, where a president disappears for almost 70 days without being in the country? This does not mean that when he is in the country, things are different. Someone asked me why we have to focus on these aspects of the conversation. He said, does it make a difference when Paul Biya is in the country or when he is not? My answer was, at this time, it is necessary to make the difference between what is important for short term and what is important for long term. The fact that when Biya is in the country makes no difference because nobody sees him, because he speaks to nobody, because accountability is not something that he holds dear to his heart, and that is received and acclaimed by members of his party, does not mean that we should shut up or forget that democracy is all about accountability. For a country said to be democratic, the leader must be able to respond to citizens, must present himself to citizens, and must explain to citizens why he makes certain decisions. Talk less of when he disappears from the country. When he is in, nobody knows. But when he jets out on a private jet, citizens are aware and citizens are asking questions. Who fueled the jet? Who is paying for the hired jet? Who is paying for the hotel suites at the Intercontinental Hotel in Geneva when he is there? Who paid those bills for 70 days at least? If those bills were paid by the citizens, then citizens have a right to know where their president is. And this comes to talk to the citizens. At what time do you think you should hold your leaders accountable? Should you at any moment hold your leaders accountable? If yes, how? When? And what strategies should you use to hold them accountable? We don't want to go too far, but in our conversation today, we are going to draw parallels, as you already heard from the introduction, with Zimbabwe. At 97, members of the ZANU PF thought Mugabe was immortal. Some of them believed that Mugabe would never leave. And citizens had risen into despondency where they thought they could do nothing to change the nature of their country. But soon, shortly after that, Mugabe's own military toppled him. When Mugabe fell, his own vice president, whom he had fired a few days before, took power. That transition was problematic because, one, Mugabe did not want his vice president to take over, who is now the president. It was rumored that Mugabe wanted his wife, Grace Mugabe, to take over. So Mugabe did not like the transition. Citizens themselves did not like the transition, meaning there was a problem. Either the citizens were not active, either the citizens were not prepared, or the citizens did not care about what was happening. Whatever the case, the transition landed where it landed, the continuation of the Mugabe regime. Now, transpose that to Cameroon. Paul Biya is 93 years old. He just came back. You saw the videos. The gentleman is frail. At 93 years, it is no exaggeration for anyone to say you are not as sharp as you used to be. What next? What is the Biya regime thinking about the country? What are Cameroonians thinking about the transitionary period? Would they sit back and watch as it happens? Or would they get themselves ready to partake in that transition? Partaking in transitions is not an easy game. It is not a game. It is not ad hoc. It is not a one-time thing. It takes preparation. So this is the moment for every democracy and every democracy-loving country or people to cast an eye on Cameroon and support all those who want to ensure that the transition is democratic, so that the transition maintains stability and peace. Undemocratic transitions sometimes lead to conflict. And with conflict, we know there is bound to be problems, loss of lives. And that is what we want to avoid. On Africa's uncomfortable questions, we want to ask those questions no one is asking. What should citizens do to effectively participate in the transition that is coming in Cameroon? Whatever way, all human beings have a shelf life. It is going to end one day. How prepared are you? How prepared is the country? How prepared are the citizens to be fully involved in the transition? Those are questions that we are going to answer today. Let me bring my guest to you so we have an honest conversation about this. Dr. Aluya, you are welcome to Beyond Africa's Uncomfortable Questions.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, as always. There are difficult questions and difficult answers. So we must have the discussion about who we are, what we do, what we need to do, and how we do it. So we can get a better um, society, better nations, and better Africa.
Thank you so much. And thank you for always making time to be here, despite your charged schedule and despite the patients you are looking after. We know it's difficult, but we love people like you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Dr. Francis Mpindu.
Yes, good afternoon, sir. Thank you for the opportunity to join you today. Listen, the topics you are touching on is like a live wire. As Dr. Aluya said, these are things we need to talk about, and rightly so. Three things stand out for me, sir, with regards to the kinds of difficult questions, uncomfortable questions that we are going to be talking about today. Three things are real when we have difficult conversations. Number one, the facts about what's happening or what has happened sometimes gets all messed up. And so we become very selective in terms of what we want to focus on. And so it's important that we remain objective. The other reality is our emotions are high because this is something we're passionate about as Africans. Listen, whatever happens in Nigeria, in Ghana, in Zimbabwe, in Ethiopia, in wherever, it affects all of us. And so our emotions, are tied up to what is happening. But last but not least is that we all have an ego. So what is happening there, each one of us feel that, of course, there's a difference between I have something to say and I have to say something. Many of us, we actually have something to say. And so when we say it, sometimes we're just too passionate. We overlook a whole lot of other things. But anyway, I just wanted to let you know that I'm looking forward to these uncomfortable conversations we're going to have today, because what is happening in Nigeria, what is happening in Cameroon affects all of us. And we all have a way to process information, and we all have a history. But listen, we all have a future. So we're all interested in solutions that will help us as we move forward. So again, thank you for the opportunity, Dr. Bernard, for being part of your team today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Francis. It's a pleasure to have you here, and especially because you're going to be sharing with us what you saw in Zimbabwe and how you think that can apply to Cameroon, or lessons that Cameroonians should apply. Whether it is coincidence or not, Biya is 93 years and Mugabe left the scene at 93 years. So let's talk about that. And both men led the country forever. I think it's almost the same for 43 years. So let's talk about that. Fabrice Lena, welcome to Africa's Uncomfortable Questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bernard, Ngalim, and thank you for inviting me to this, your novel program. It's my pleasure to be a participant, a panelist in your program today, and to give my contribution about things happening in the continent, in the African continent. I am very passionate about change, about the transition that can lead us to a new Africa, a better Africa. And of course, we will be making a complete analysis and diagnosis of how young people across the continent could be active participants in the process of change that they seek, the change that we want and the Africa we want. And that's why the issue of Cameroon is a big concern to me, in particular to young people of the African continent in general. The situation in Nigeria with the presidential election campaign already on side, it's also a preoccupation to us. Why we are looking at the possibility of power changing from one leader to the other without violence, without bloodshed. And that is why this discussion is very important, essential to talk to our fellow brothers and sisters that, yes, peaceful transition is possible. And politics is not always about the maneuver, the manipulation, the negative, and the desire to stay on to power forever. So I'm glad to be your participant and looking forward to making earnest contribution to this program. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fabrice. You are so focused on youth involvement in politics and youth development. And we all know what happened to you after the elections because you spoke the truth. The elections in Cameroon in 2025, you spoke the truth and you bore the consequences for speaking that truth, especially in a system where youths are not given an opportunity and journalists and critics are being silenced. You said what you saw. All these months after the elections and the ordeal you went through, how are you now? Are you happy?
Well, I think that, we are at a point in the continent where someone has to dare to say the truth as it is. Because after observing what happened in Cameroon, I could not stay quiet. I could not stay muted in the face of obstructions, of challenges, of, a major crisis when every young person thought that this is the point at which we will have change in the country. We can't say that there will be effective leadership under someone that is above 90 years old. Then we are fooling ourselves. There is nobody that at that age, the mental capacity permits them to reason, to be rational enough to take the responsibilities of the president of a republic. That is not something that any rational human being will say. It's going to take a country to transformation, to a new vision. So with what happened in October 2025, everyone can see that the country it's stagnant. The country is not moving forward. Nothing is changing, and therefore we will have to do our best to move the country forward and to make sure that we change the narrative. And that's why I still stand with the things I said in October 2025, and I still stand to defend those points. And I am not giving up. I'm not wavering my commitment for change in Cameroon.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Fabrice. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are watching us now, you are on Africa's Uncomfortable Questions, brought to you by Beyond Africa. And this is a Pan-African program where we seek experiences from across Africa so that we can learn what people are doing in their different countries and adopt the good policies or the good practices within our own countries. Sometimes we tend to act in isolation and we ignore problems that happen in other countries, but we can always get lessons from there. As you heard from Fabrice, he went through so much after the 2025 October presidential election in Cameroon. He made declarations of what he saw. He saw that Chiruma was leading in elections, and on a co-hosted panel where I was, he said Chiruma was winning. And a few days later, he was picked up from the streets by men in civilian attire. And the next location was New Bell Prison. That is what happens where transitions are not planned or where something fishy is about to happen. That is why we are opening this platform to discuss about transitions and build minds. Let people know how transitions come about and what needs to be done, especially when transitions are not certain. If you are joining us now, kindly like, share, comment, and also share the link. Share the link with your networks so that people can join us to follow these important conversations that we are about to have. And on your screen, you will see the number through which you can text us. If you want your text to be read out during the conversation, send a text to that number on WhatsApp only. No calls, no direct messages, only text messages on WhatsApp. Thank you so much. So let us start our conversation today with Nigeria. Over the last week, President Tinubu's case has been front and center of conversations between Nigeria and the United States. Atiku Abubakar has hired an international lobby firm to ask the United States government to release documents they have that mentioned President Tinubu and some drug dealings he had when he was in the United States. The case is ongoing. Let's not talk about the technicalities of the case, but let's look at what is important. Trust. How is the trust being built between Nigerians and the president's incumbent, who is a candidate for the elections that come in January 2027? Do Nigerians, Dr. Aluya, trust that the president they see is the president whose records are out there? Dr. Aluya. I cannot hear you.
Sorry, I had muted myself. No, I was saying thank you once again for the opportunity to be here. And I'll begin by saying this, and I've said it before everywhere I am. There are two things I seek for an individual. When I want to do business with them, ask them to do stuff or carry out an assignment or project. One is trust, two is capacity. Do they have the capacity to do the things they say they're going to do? And can I trust them to do what they're going to say, or if they have the legitimate moral intellect or value to carry out the task that's been given to them. And as with Nigeria, every other African country is sad to say, most of them, they lack those two, trust and capacity. With regards to Nigeria, trust is a big issue. And when we particularly have our leader that has been smeared, involved in issues that happened way back in the 1990s. And this is a warning to young folks as well, that the things you do today, way back then, they didn't have the internet trail, and now we have internet trail. Whatever you do, say, or post, or show online, the digital footprint now. And then the future will begin to affect you one way or the other. So this happened in the 1990s, and in I think, what's this guy's name again? Aaron Greenspan puts out a Freedom of Act application for the thing that happened in 1992 regarding, one, Mr. Tinubu and the Chicago area-based drug and money laundering issue. And that's where we are today. And this has been going on for so long, to the point where the FBI is saying, hey, they can't release the information because it would jeopardize the life and safety of a lot of people, which, again, that's another discussion. But for us as individuals in Nigeria, the question we begin to ask right now, what are they hiding? What are they holding? And if the judge in 2025, all through to 2025 to 2026, I think Judge Howell said those records should be released. I see no reason why it shouldn't be, so that Nigerians can truly know who their leaders are, what is it that they're hiding, and so that each person who's involved truly will be vindicated. We want a vindicated leader, Tinubu, so that we can truly, go on to trust him as an individual, as a leader for our country, and because it matters a lot, it really does. What's going on? What's the hold? And why is the FBI not wanting to release those records? And whose lives will be jeopardized? Is it worse than what's happening right now in Boko Haram, with Boko Haram and ISIS, with thousands and thousands of individuals that are killed, lives lost, individuals who have been displaced, for hundreds of over 2 million people displaced in northern Nigeria? What's the worst that can happen in this stage at this point? So Nigerians are asking those questions. We want to be able to trust the leader who's going to lead, who's running to lead for the next 4 years. It's imperative that this question.
But Dr. Nelson, he and his supporters would argue that such allegations were made in 2023 about his academic credentials. But since then, he's been president irrespective. Why don't you judge him on his outcome instead of going back to records of 1993?
Well, the question is, there are two mutually exclusive things. One is on his records. whether he went to high school or whether he went to college or whatever. Listen, he's president, and at the end of it all, before that he was governor, and none of this comes up. So we must begin to learn to decipher what is politics, what's true genuine interest, and what is the discordance, in the sense of people also want to seek power, they themselves who have nefarious activities in their cupboards, or things that are questionable in their lives as well. So who's asking those questions, why and for what reason? These are questions we need to ask those who are asking. Nevertheless, it doesn't obviate the fact that, hey, we need to know who our leader is. If he's committed anything way back, then we need to know. Look, you and I know that in most developed countries, people ask these questions for a reason. We saw what happened to the royal family when one of them was recently, removed from the royal company. I think, what's his name now, who's no longer entitled because of the Epstein issues. And these are things that related way back to the very early times when he was really very young. And this is what happened to him. We see what happened to Bill Gates and President Bill Clinton. That all of these things came up. So look, we also need to be respected and valued as individuals and citizens. We need to ask and have those answered, those questions, no matter how difficult they are, to be answered as well. We deserve that as Nigeria. We deserve that as a nation, so that we can move on a clean slate. In all sincerity, the biggest question right now is, why are they not hold? Why do they? I mean, it's ridiculous, really, to think that the FBI, of all people, and every other agencies will hold files when we know they have released files on Biden's son. They released files on everybody that you may even think of, even Trump files. Something he did, decades ago, were released. And why are they holding up that of a Nigerian president, or who's also running? What do they have against it? And they're saying it's going to affect lives and properties. What else would there be that's worse than where we are right now? It doesn't change the fact that, look, Nigeria has accepted him once he became president. If he's going to run again, well, we need to run on a clean slate. We need to understand and know where those things are, not just for the sake of Nigeria. And like we always say, look, it's for the sake, like my brother said, he's Zambia, is Zimbabwe. What happens to Nigeria happens to him as well. What happens to Cameroon happens to me. We need to ask those difficult questions. We need to know where our leaders are, what they've done, what's held against them, what are they holding over their heads? What's holding us as a people from moving forward? Again, because the day Nigeria wakes up, it is not just Africa will wake up, the entire black race. The black race wants to move forward. We want to know what the issues are.
Thank you, Dr. Nelson. Let me have Dr. Francis. You've heard Dr. Nelson say it needs to go back to the clean slate. Nigerians need to understand what their president is and whom their president had been, which makes logical sense. But Dr. Francis, do you think that it's logical for the president to say those records would harm individuals, so don't release them? And then on the other hand, he says, Nigerians, trust me, I'll be a good president. I have been a good president. I'll offer you all you need.
Dr. Bernard, there is no saint without a past, and there's no sinner without a future. When it comes to anybody dealing with anything that is kind of dubious or regarded as something that requires investigation from legal perspectives, nothing gets thrown out for the sake of because it happened in the 1990s. We are talking about integrity. We're talking about trust. So if you want people to trust you, even if it means that you're coming out and saying, listen, I did these things and I have grown out of that. I have become a different person. I've become a better person. Then I think it's important for the president to come out and say that. But to make reference to something that we haven't seen or something that hasn't been disclosed in its entirety, to say that it might endanger lives and it might impact this and that, but we don't even know what we're dealing with, I don't think that is a wise decision or a wise move on his part to say that. I really believe that he should be the kind of person who should stand up and own his mistakes. If there are mistakes, talk about it. Because the more he does that, then people are going to see him as a human. One of the sad things about some of our African leaders is that they want to portray themselves as untouchable, or people who really pretty much know everything. And we know that life is not like that. So I agree with Dr. Nelson. He needs to come out in the open and say what needs to be said. Having said that, I really think that when we're dealing with different countries, something to do with the judicial system, it's very, very difficult for that information with FBI to be released to anybody else other than to another judicial system within Nigeria. And I think if that was to happen, that would then require that body to then say, okay, there's nothing to worry about. It's about this and this, even though they may not go into details, but at least we know that that information has been disclosed. So I really think that here's an opportunity. If he wants to win fairly and let the people decide based on his own merits, then the past is the past. But we need to come out in the open and say, this is what has happened. And I think if he did that, he would actually earn the trust and support of the people.
You say if he wants to win fairly, he should come out plainly and say this or that. And you say if he wants to win the trust of the people, he should come out plainly and say this is what happened. But he intervened in the case in the United States, and you are right. It's difficult for judicial systems to release some kind of information. That is true. But he intervened in the case of the United States to say if these records are released, it's going to be harmful to some people. So who are those people he is protecting? And does that say that he doesn't care about fairness in elections at home, or doesn't care about the opinion of the people? Because if the fundamental grounds for fairness and justice in the election is knowing whom the president is, but the president says, no, keep those sealed.
I think making a statement like that, that what is in there could harm some people, I think one of the people he's harming is really himself. Because now that this is in the open, I don't think that knowing my brothers and sisters in Nigeria, knowing how smart and how proactive they are, I don't think they're going to put this to rest without having answers to this. So I think the best thing he could do, among others, is to not protect that information, but to come out in the open and actually say this is what happened. Now, I know it might be difficult. It might let some of his rough edges come out in the open, but I think in doing that, he's actually showing character. Because becoming a leader, becoming a president is such an honorable position. Unfortunately, some of the things that happen in some of our African countries, people get voted by popularity and not necessarily based on character. So I think he will have an opportunity here to show people his character and say, yeah, listen, this is because from what I'm reading between the lines, and I'm reading between the lines now, for him to say that, it's almost like he knows that things in there are going to incriminate him. So if he is to preempt that and let the people know what's in there before it's actually made known, because you know what, whether we like it or not, at some point it'll be known. And I think he would do himself justice and do himself good by just letting people know. right now before, somebody else gets their hands on it. He should be man enough to come out and just say, this is who I am, and let that stand.
Thank you. Let me take this up with Fabrice. Fabrice, you've just heard all these arguments that have been made about all these reasons why President Tinubu should come out plain and square to let Nigerians and others know exactly whom he is. At what point do you think there is a question of privacy and the citizens' right to know whom their president is? Should the president at some point not come out plainly to let the people know whom he is because of privacy considerations?
That I do think that African presidents and African leaders sometimes have that challenge of making clear and transparent declarations about themselves, especially during elections and presidential campaigns. For the case of Nigeria president, I think there are real court records of an amount of money, I think about $460,000 that he forfeited because of an account that was linked to, some activities that the U.S. government considered to be linked to drugs. But he forfeited that amount, and it is documented. However, other issues regarding his integrity or whether it was a criminal prosecution is something one cannot authoritatively say because there is no such clear documents saying those things. But, leaders in Africa sometimes are clouded by the mystery of the personality called the mystery of who they really are. And especially those people who have been involved in transnational and international business schemes, and himself has been a businessman. So sometimes citizens trust to them as the president, the CEO of the resources of the country is in doubt when their own personal life, their own personal personality cannot really define a traction of where they are coming from, how they get their money, and how they are managing the resources of the country. And everyone can see in Nigeria now, Nigeria is a country with a lot of entertainment, with a lot of, good and vibrant minds. The young people in the country are saying it every day that, there is a trust issue between citizens and the state. There is a trust issue between the president of the republic and the citizens. Like the state-citizen relationship, it's on the pendulum. There is a kind of, disconnection between the aspirations of the people and the policies that the president is pursuing. And it is at the place of the president to say, well, me as a person, the rumors you hear on the internet, this is what is true and this is what is not true. Because sometimes you really need to, come out and make a clear definition of yourself to your citizens, and then let your citizens see that, okay, the nobility of your intentions is what we are choosing. The nobility of your decision to come out and say, yes, I am your president. Yeah, these things happen, and this is what I want for you. This is my intentions for the country. This is how I want these things to go. But for the past 3.5 years, we've seen a kind of president who is more or less similar to those of other African countries where they're absent and then absent-minded and then just come to address major issues. And I think Nigeria is a little bit more of a functional democracy than some other countries, like or even my country, where we see presidents that are not available, presidents that do not, go down to the people when disaster happen, when some major issues happen in the country. But we see a kind of president that is constrained by the judicial arm with presidential mandate limits. And then, his last campaign speech was, "It's my turn." Like they said in Yoruba, "Emilokan, it's my turn to be president." So it was just like, a kind of national cake or an estate where it's some other person's turn to be the president, to be the authority, to lead, to eat. So the perception is not that of someone who wants to transform, leave a legacy. So all those things are what makes the Gen Z uncomfortable with, the leadership style of trying to term the position of the president, your personality, cases you've had in the past, to link it to your integrity. So the Nigerian president have the responsibility to clear the air, to tell the Nigerians the truth, and to make it clear, because that is going to play a lot on his vote. It's going to play a lot on how people would trust him. It's going to play a lot on the outcome of the 2027 presidential elections in Nigeria. And I hope that he will be able to make this giant of Africa, this great country, that place that it deserves to be, because Nigeria is supposed to be the Singapore of Africa. It's supposed to be, that great country. It has a lot of wealth, a lot of talent, a lot of resources. And we are not supposed to see a Nigeria of insecurity, a Nigeria of, wealth gap, very large wealth gap between those who are extremely rich and those who are extremely poor. Those things are things that we are seeing a very low pace progress so far. And we hope that he will be able to do better as he goes to campaign again. And I just wish that Nigerians, as citizens of the country, should open their eyes and understand what they want. It's a challenge. It's a continental challenge. We ourselves cannot give Nigeria much lessons because we have not been able to even achieve half of what they have achieved. The Fourth Republic of Nigeria from 1999 to 2026 have seen at least 4 different presidents and 4 different leadership. I used to say, no matter how bad a country is and its leadership is, when citizens know they can persevere for 4 years and get rid of that person and a new person will come because it is constitutional restrictions, is far more better than a country where, the ability to renew mandate is unlimited. So I think Nigerians have to strengthen their democracy and then understand campaign speeches far beyond just saying that it's my turn to be president.
You say Nigerians need to strengthen their democracy. And at what point do you think that if President Tinubu realizes that in 2023, he went scot-free on the certificate issue, 2027, he goes again free on the drugs case issue, at what point would he start thinking that if I could go through all these, then I could get a third mandate because Nigerians don't care?
From my own experience, traveling across the African continent, Nigeria being one of those countries I admire so much, I love so much. It's our neighbors. We share a lot of things in common. Citizens of most African countries themselves are more transactional than the leaders. Transactional in the sense that there is expectation of that material good that they can consume for the moment, instead of, putting their vote on transformation, on ideology, on legacy. They put it on the material stuffs that could be shared to them immediately. And this is affecting a lot of African countries. This is affecting Nigeria. So what you will see between now and 2027 in Nigeria is sharing of rice, sharing of a lot of material things. And then people see that instant, immediate consumption goods. There is no consideration of sacrifice of the immediate consumer stuffs for a better capital investment for the springboard effect of transformation of the country. When you look at what happened in most Asian countries that are far more developing today, China, Singapore, Malaysia, and so on, at one point in time, they said, we have to sacrifice the consumption of consumer goods in order to prepare our country for emergence by producing more capital goods that will have a magnified result in producing more consumer goods and stabilize the country. But, a country like Nigeria could set those kind of goals and achieve them. But what you see citizens base their campaign on and the decision to vote a leader on is more of how much bag of rice they can get, how much savon they can get, how much of these little things they can get. And at the end of the day, you will want to blame the leaders, but what are the citizens doing? Are the citizens making the right choice? Are they making informed choice? Are they informed enough? Do they even listen to analysis of academia? Do they even follow documentaries of leaders? Do they even follow traction of resource usage in the country? Do they even have an understanding of how their country is being perceived in the world stage? Do they know the power play? Do they know the institutions? Do they know the actors? So I think that civic and political education is still a serious problem with the voter population of most African countries, Nigeria being one of it. And that is where I would say most voters are not as informed as they should be before the day of election. Because I even saw it in our context in Cameroon when we were doing campaign. You see people that when you come talk to them, they are expecting that immediately after the speech, there should be some buffet and then some drinks in order to, and at the end of the buffet and the drinks, the comments is that, well, this is more important than all the discussions that had already taken place. So you understand that the mindset of the people is immediate benefit. Unlike the Western democracies where, town hall meetings are more of the discussions, are more of the questioning and answer, are more of inquiry of that person's capacity, the values, the things that the person wants to really, really do and how they are going to achieve those things. If you go in front of voters in Africa, most of the time it is the shouting, the hyping, the slants, the slogans. There are no real critical candidate debate to that extent that you see the step-by-step process of how a leader is going to transform a society, So it's most of the time the general, dogmatic declarations that cannot even be defined, so vague that one cannot even understand the start and the end. So I implore Nigerians and African citizens to please follow up your actors, political actors, follow up your institutions, try to understand them, understand how they function. You should understand the political order of your country. How is power defined from the top to the bottom? Who is supposed to play what role? And how is that affecting your own life? Don't sit and be consumer of policies, be consumer of decisions that you are not part of it. Like I always say, if you are not part of the political process of your country, then you have no moral and legal rights to complain about the decisions being taken without your consent.
Thank you so much, Fabrice. That is so deep. I took some notes about the transactional nature of democracy in Africa and the need for the youths and other citizens to understand how decisions are made and be fully involved in the politics of decision making. Before I get to Dr. Nelson, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching us. And if you are still watching us now, it means you are finding value in this conversation. Kindly subscribe, like, leave a comment, and above all, share this conversation with your networks. Let people be involved in these conversations. As Fabrice just said, if we do not follow these types of conversations, we are not informed on what is happening across the continent and in our own countries, where we need to be informed of decision-making and the reasoning behind those decisions. Let me speak to Dr. Nelson. Dr. Nelson, you've heard Fabrice made the argument about the transactional nature of politics. Is President Tinubu refusing that those results or the records with the US FBI and the DEA not be released because he is convinced that during campaigns, he's going to use the transactional nature of politics and have people vote for him?
Now, the irony is it's not even President Tinubu who's refusing right now. It's the FBI and all the other agencies that the court had asked to release things since 2025. So, and the FBI actually put what they call it, ex parte application, a private application right now to withhold those records. They're citing incidents of increased risk to lives and livelihoods if those records are released. It's not even President Tinubu that's doing it right now. It's even the FBI, and the court had actually requested that these things be released, and that's why I think on August 21st an extension was put in for another 5 to 10 days as well. So the question is, what are they hiding? What's the FBI holding against Nigeria and its presidency at this stage not to release those records? You tell me that if President Trump has records that are withheld and the FBI will not release it, or any other country, let's be frank. And these are issues that must be addressed. And it really hurts to think that an organization as esteemed as referent like the FBI and the other agencies within the United States will take this path when it comes to Nigeria. understanding what Nigeria is going through, the security issues and the economic strife that's going on. They will take this part as a whole. So that's where the question is. What is it that they're holding? What are they holding against him? What are they holding against Nigeria as a people? Because look, we all need to know this. Like you alluded to, all right, there's a past with regards to the certificate. There was a past to this initial claims. There's a past to a whole lot of things that were done before he became president. All right. Personally, I don't think he's done a bad job. In all sincerity, there've been things I've agreed that he's done with regards to, the economy and taking the gumshoe to take bold steps on oil subsidies and all the other things that he's done. These are things that should have been done a couple of years ago. But then the biggest issue now is implementation of those things and how effectively and genuinely, intentionally, those policies that have been put in place would be truly applied to the matter so that Nigeria should truly move forward. And the trust and capacity that we talk about with outlined corruption within the government and all the other things that's been going on. Who's behind this? Who's perpetrating it? And there are big questions that need to ask, and Nigerians need to answer those questions. Look, like my brother from Cameroon across our neighbors alluded to earlier on, Nigeria is a great country. It's a fantastic country with amazing, brilliant people. And I think we should not be where we are at all. We shouldn't. Where we have issues about, rights sharing and all that. Our people need to be above that level as it is right now. But it takes the leadership to a point where they need to genuinely and purposefully and wholeheartedly determine what they need for the country, for its people, and how they need to create a plan, an agenda, 10, 20, 40, 50, 60 years agenda for the country so that they see the country move forward. It's sad that in 2026 and even in 2027, we still have to a point where to the citizens of a nation like Nigeria, they need to share rice and rapa just to get votes. But it spells the mindset and how much those who are seeking political offices respect the country as itself, respect the citizens at that point. Now, the question now is, why is this happening? Is it based on the literacy rate, or is it the what do you call it? I use the word the weaponization of poverty, because that's how it looks like. They weaponize poverty, they weaponize religion, they weaponize tribalism, they weaponize all of these things because they need to deviously seek power and control. But the day will come when Nigerians will say no, and it's coming. People are beginning to get aware as individuals are beginning to get exposed. There's internet penetration across the country, and people will begin to ask those questions. Like you said, Gen Zs are despondent, they're angry, they see what's happening around the world, they will say no is a no. We had an issue one time with Lekki. We pray something like that never happens again, but it takes the effort of a genuine effort of a government that truly care for its people and want to do the right thing and do it for them. But as we say that, we need to also understand what are the external factors that are inhibiting our leaders for doing the right thing for its people. There's a precedence for the last 4, 5, 6 decades of what's going on. And we as a people need to sit down. And that's why platforms like this are taking place, where it is not just a Nigerian factor, it's not just a Nigerian problem, it's also a Cameroonian problem. We see what's across Cameroon, we see what's across other countries as we see now, that individuals within the continent will have that frank discussion, ask those difficult questions, and seek difficult answers to our collective problem of leadership.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nelson. Let's have Dr. Francis. And Dr. Francis, I want you to put in your conflict expert hat here. for these things we're discussing, we mentioned Cameroon in a moment. We'll soon be going into a deep dive on Cameroon and what we're hearing also from Nigeria. Are you seeing any ingredients of instability, conflict, or wars in what we are seeing around all these issues we've just discussed?
Oh, definitely, Dr. Bernard. I think one of the sad things about how we look at our human interactions from an African perspective is that conflict must be avoided, and we need to learn to get along. But conflict is inevitable. As long as we have different information, different ways of processing information, different ways of observing or analyzing information, we always, and I mean that, always arrive at different conclusions. And so based on that, we have to look at conflict not as a point of dissension, but an opportunity to discover how come we are different, and then say, how do we create a future together? So this is why I really believe that some of our African leaders need to look at opposition parties within our individual nations as a good thing. A good thing in the sense that they provide a perspective that you may not have. And so you learn from that. You know, I am yet to hear a debate or a dialogue, a public debate where someone says, opposition party, you just mentioned a very, very good point that we were not thinking about, but thank you for bringing that to our attention. We are going to act on that before you guys do. People who complement each other, people who look at a conversation or engage in a conversation to learn and not to counteract. As we have heard that we need to listen to understand, not to listen to counteract what is being said. And so if we started looking at conflict from that perspective and say conflict is an opportunity for us to find out how come we are different. For example, my significant other, when we have conflict, we have this premise that should say, listen, you're not the enemy and I'm not the enemy. Let's find out our differences so that we continue to journey together. So if political parties would look at this from that perspective and say, you know what, fundamentally you guys believe A, B, C, D, and we don't subscribe to that. But listen, when you come up with good points, we are going to listen and we're going to perfect our game based on what we have heard from you. So all this to say, I'm very excited about what is going to happen in Nigeria. I'm not a prophet, and I work for a non-profit, and my father and mother were not prophets either. So there's no way I can be prophetic on this, but I know that great things are going to come out of Nigeria. Why am I saying this? You have candidates now who are different, including the current Mr. President. But something is going to happen because people are going to look at what is happening from a different perspective. All these squabbles, people are processing information. So my take is, from what I'm seeing, we need to look at information that comes to the table as something that will contribute to a better nation. As a result, what is it that we can learn? So, Mr. President, let's not avoid the squabbles and all the comments, the negative comments that are coming from other people. That's an opportunity for you to learn, sir, and say, what are they saying that I need to listen to so that I can become a better person? Because I can assure you, some of the people who are vying for this position, they are men who have said, listen, I've done mistakes. Yes, you have questioned this, but this is who I am. And they are wearing their hearts on their sleeves, basically, and letting other people know. So we need to look at conflict as a good thing, as an opportunity to find out our differences and then say, okay, how do we create a future together? And I think if we took that approach, things would look much, much better from that perspective.
Thank you so much, Dr. Francis. We're going to double down on that in a moment, but I want us to switch gears now and talk about Cameroon, where we're going to be building on your message. But before we talk about Cameroon, ladies and gentlemen, every Wednesday, we have a midweek interview, and that interview is always very informative. I implore you to always watch that interview and share it. If you're watching us on Facebook, kindly go over to YouTube on our page, Beyond Africa Podcast, and subscribe there, because the interviews are published only on YouTube. Martin, give us a teaser for this week's interview.
Whatever nursing, it means for the rest of your life, you're going to be a miserable nurse. If you are an accountant and then suddenly you land in America or wherever you are and someone tells you, you better get into nursing. People expect that, they get this information that getting into nursing or getting into the healthcare system is where the jobs really are. Not realizing that, even if you are an accountant in your country, even if you were a lawyer, there are pathways for you to go ahead and do that. There are organizations dedicated to helping immigrants continue with their previous careers in America. Imagine if you are an accountant and then suddenly you land in America or wherever you are and someone tells you, you better get into nursing, be a doctor, go be this. And you probably are not that kind of person. How is your life going to be once you do whatever nursing? It means for the rest of your life, you're going to be a miserable nurse.
Thank you so much, Martin. And this interview is dedicated to those who are abroad and those who are planning to go abroad. It tells you about how you integrate, how you find it easy to go about the job market. It's a must watch. It is something you should watch and share with other friends. Even if you've been abroad for a long time, it gives you insights to know how to go about the system to make the best use of it legally and to maximize the reasons for which you moved abroad. So let's switch over to Cameroon. And Fabrice, we're having this conversation about Nigeria. And Dr. Martin ended on a point where he said, when he's in conflict with a significant other, the first thing they recognize is they are not enemies. They simply have disagreements. And when it comes to the national stage, do you believe that in Cameroon, the current regime sees those who are asking for a peaceful, well-organized transition as people who love the state, or are they looking at them as enemies of the state?
Yeah, the concept of state-citizen relationship depends on where people draw their philosophical inspiration about state power, who holds monopoly of violence over the people, and how you look at state power. Cameroon is a country where state power has been mystified a lot. The president is seen as a mystical human being who is not supposed to be talked about in layman language, or who is not supposed to be questioned, who is not supposed to render accountability to the citizens, who is not even supposed to be talked about by citizens. So the president is seen as some sort of figure or demigod who is not accessible and should not be accessible to the people. So in that kind of conception of the role of the president, it makes it difficult for citizens to even feel free to talk about their leader in a way that is that makes them feel comfortable. Now, when you talk about how opposition, those seeking for change, are being perceived by the state, because state power in Cameroon is conceived as something that is supposed to be conserved without end. So we do not have rotatory presidency. We do not have end to the time that the president can renew his mandate. Our constitution is still very fragile. That aspects of the constitution, like declaration of assets, like ability of the president to resign, can be maneuvered by the president at any time, and then he goes scot-free with it. There are certain aspects of our constitution, like declaration of asset, which is 66, article number 66 of the constitution, that had never been implemented till date. And some of the clauses of the 1996 constitution of Cameroon had never been implemented until the Anglophone crisis of 2016 broke out. And when you look at all these elements, what does it tell you? The state actors, the head of the judiciary, the legislative and the executive arm of the government have simply taken the country on hostage, and they don't see the citizens as part of that union, part of that collective energy that is supposed to build the country. So if we were to agree on the points that all of us belong to Cameroon, all of us are patriotic, all of us love this country, and all of us will push the country forward, then you should not say that my own vision or my own idea on how the country political order should be organized, my own idea on how we should push the country on a transformational note, my own suggestions are suggestions of destabilization of the country, are suggestions that are wanton, are suggestions that should not be considered. So that is where the problem comes from, because the problem comes from how you perceive the person giving you suggestions on how best the country can be managed. You cannot rule a country on the basis of you having monopoly of power, monopoly of knowledge, monopoly of strategy, monopoly of management of institutions, and it's unending. It's unending because we are not in a monarchy, neither are we in an oligarchy. We say we are practicing democracy, which means some of the basic principles must be respected. There must be end to the time that a particular political party should govern, not simply because the party is too insightful and have all its capacity to govern endlessly, but because democracy requires an expiry time. There must be a timeline.
What I hear from you is Cameroon doesn't seem to acknowledge the fact, or the current regime doesn't seem to acknowledge the fact that they cannot be in power at some point. And then secondly, that the president is almost at the end of his life, and either way, he is going to leave the presidency at some point. Therefore, there is nothing about succession being discussed.
I think the question of succession is, first of all, absurd in democracy, because when we are talking about democracy, we have established constitution. I used to tell people that no matter how bad Cameroon constitution is, it could be an inspiration for a better modification, for a refined constitution, for a better one, because we have an article, that is Article 6, sub 3 and 4, which stipulates that in case of vacancy, incapacitation, or inability for the president to discharge its functions as head of state, then the Constitutional Council recognizes, notices this absence or this vacancy, recognizes and establishes the basis of new election, where everyone else who is interested to be president of the republic declare their candidacy and election is conducted within 90 days. This is what people should be talking about, and not succession. Where is the question of succession coming from? This is not constitutional. That is what they call gray a gray. That is maneuver. That is the unconstitutional handover of power. And this is what I say no to it, because this is not what Cameroonians fought for in the 90s. This is not what the All Anglophone Conference was held for. This is not what the civil society unions, the tripartite conference in Yaoundé was held for. This is not the spirit that guided Cameroonians to come out with a 1996 constitution that gave autonomy to regions, change the provinces to regions, and establish regional councils. That's not the spirit. The spirit here is that if the president of the republic is at that point where he is right now, everyone else can see and know that he is at that point where he can't discharge his decision and his functions as the head of state anymore. There should be an election to usher in a new president, not succession, not succession.
We saw in April an amendment to the constitution that guaranteed a succession. Are you saying that Cameroonians are looking forward to a day when that succession is going to be replaced by a democratic transition?
That is why there is the struggle. That is why I still, despite being muzzled by this regime, I still talk. Because people need to know that countries do not strengthen their democracy by simply making analysis and not taking any action to see that that democracy is strengthened. A democracy of a country doesn't come to have stability and power rotation one day. Nigeria, that we just spoke about, did not come to have 4 years presidential office mandate, renewable ones on the platter of gold. They saw dictatorship. They saw military takeover. They saw tough moments, you know. Same with Ghana. Same with Zimbabwe. Same with Zambia. So countries have gone through, you know, those tough moments before they could say that at this point in time, we need to redefine the basis of our destiny as a people. And Cameroonians should not sit on you know, the comfort zone of saying, well, whatever should happen, should happen. It shouldn't be so. A country cannot be that, you know, hijacked by a few minority of part of a population that the people have surrendered their right to so they could manage the country. So it is the responsibility of citizens to take back their rights that they are forfeited to the state if the state is not fulfilling its own responsibility to guarantee their protection, to guarantee their enjoyment and enjoyment of the resources that God gave them, to guarantee that they could live life fully. And I say it is a continuous process. It is a struggle. What is happening now in Cameroon is a situation where there is a clear roadmap to secession, but people have to think of how to, you know, establish a rapport de force, as they put it in French, establish, you know, a kind of, you know, tell the government that we won't accept this. This is unacceptable. This is not what our forefathers died for. This is not what NS1D fought for. This is not what the Fonchers fought for. This is not what Nijon Frundi fought for. This is not what Aya Paul fought for. This is not what Pendai Kuka fought for. These people who died saying that the institutions are not well, this is not what they fought for. And us, the younger generation, cannot fold our arms to say, well, yeah, the deal is done. They have succeeded. And then we just, no. People have to say that it shouldn't happen. We have to say something. The world needs to know that Cameroon is at the mercy of a certain kind of leadership that is creating exceptional circumstances out of Cameroon constitution to rule the people. And the people are stifled at every level in order not to air their mind, to practice even the basics of democracy. And this is what I say, secession is not the question. The question is, how did we get to normalization of the question of secession when there is a constitutional pathway to getting a new president? How did we get there? How did we get to that point?
I want to go to Dr. Francis to tell us a little bit about lessons Cameroon could learn from Zimbabwe, but I'm not yet done with you, Fabrice. If Fabrice could come back, I wanted to hear from you. You said citizens should do certain things. Can you name just 3 things that citizens should be doing to ensure
citizens,
that
I think that Cameroonians are not informed enough. Cameroonians are not organized enough. Cameroonians are not acting collectively enough. These are the 3 basic things. If you're informed, you're going to understand how you were supposed to be best of the best in Africa. We have the greatest of talents, the greatest of human resources, the greatest of smartest brains everywhere. And that's why Cameroonians, wherever they leave their country to other part of the world, they excel. They excel. Everybody can testify of this. Use that capacity, you know, to produce knowledge, produce skills, to learn about the institutions of your country, the actors of your country. Have that information in your fingertips. Information is power. Once you're informed, your opponent cannot defeat you when it comes to robbing minds and idea sharing or how best to define the destiny of our country. Stay informed. That is the basic way to avoid apathy. Because when you're informed, believe me, there are things that the state cannot just come and lie to you like that. The state can easily lie or say things that are not true when you're not informed as a citizen. That's the first thing. The second thing is, you get organized, because when you organize as citizens of a country, it permits you to act collectively and to act under the umbrella of a particular movement, you see. So these are the basic recommendations I could give to Cameroonians. And these things have worked in other parts of the world. It's just simply a logic. It's just a logic. Organized citizens always overthrow dictatorship leaderships across the world.
Thank you so much, Fabrice. I'll come back to you. Thank you so much for those lessons. I want to bring Dr. Francis Mpindo to the stage and ask him what he thinks are those lessons that Cameroonians can take out of Zimbabwe. Because Mugabe was 93 years old. He had ruled for almost 43 years. Same scenario, same numbers with Cameroon. And the transition is at this point where we are looking at what happens in Zimbabwe. What do you think Zimbabweans missed that Cameroonians should not miss?
Thank you very much, Dr. Bernard, for that. But before I respond to that, I just want to commend you for asking our brother Fabrice to explain the fact that there is some kind of, not some kind of, but there is a succession plan that was put in place, which has not been implemented. And then he went on to say that succession is absurd in a democracy. I'm not too sure I'm clear on that. The reason being, Dr. Bernard, see, the way we are thinking today as Africans has been influenced by other people. And rightly so, because we live in this global village where we are interacting with other people. We are not an island. We interact with other people, whether we like it or not. And so as we interact with other people, we get to know certain things that influence how we think and what we do. And we need to continue to do that in order to have a place in this global village. So I would like our brother Fabrice to enlighten us a little more on that, because I really think that succession is not absurd in democracy. In fact, the way we look at democracy has to be Africanized, because the democracy in the US is not necessarily the democracy in Africa. That's my take on that, and I would be more than happy to have conversation with someone along that, because whatever has been described as democracy from the Western society may not necessarily fit our situation. Let me explain. President Robert Gabriel Mugabe is one of the most renowned African leaders who ascended, in my view, to the level of some of those early African leaders like Dr. Francis Kwame Nkrumah, Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, Dr. Kamuzu Banda, Dr. Kenneth Kaunda, Emperor Haile Selassie, and many, many others, including Mwalimu Kambarage Julius Nyerere. These are men who learned the language and the culture of the colonizers, and yet they remained African and turned things around to actually say, let's utilize the information we have learned so that we become better. So this is why you would have Dr. Nkrumah saying, what is the independence and liberation of Ghana if the rest of Africa is not liberated? So they looked at what was happening from within the system. Now, going to Zimbabwe, President Gabriel Robert Mugabe, he had 7 earned degrees, and he had 3 honorary doctorates. And he told people categorically, don't call me doctor, because these are honorary doctorates. Now in Africa right now, I'm actually writing a book on this. We have an infatuation with degrees and initials and labels that sometimes it's very, very unrealistic. But Mr. Mugabe refused, because he said, these are honorary doctorates. I'm not supposed to be called a doctor. Now, that's a story for another time. Someone has said that if a man does not know where he is going, how does he know he has arrived? And I like to believe that Mr. Robert Gabriel Mugabe, President Robert Gabriel Mugabe, he knew where he wanted to go. But I think along the way, things changed in such a way that they ended up with not as much clarity. And I have to be careful because I'm a small fish in a big pond here. He is a man who thought some things through, and he did some things right and he did some things wrong because he is a human being. And I like to believe that if you don't know when to exit, and I think this was part of the problem here, if you don't know when to exit, you can easily create political anxiety and frustration for yourself and frustration around the people there with you, because that is a mindset every leader should have. And although I like to believe a little bit in some of the things that our brother Fabrice was bringing to light, but I like to also think along the lines of a succession plan for each leader. We have great leaders. We've had great leaders in Africa. And I think it's important to have a succession plan. And I'm saying this because when you value the input of other people and you realize that there are other people around me who are good at other things that I'm not, then I need to see myself as having been a gift to my nation for a season and not for life.
Dr. Pindo.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, if we're in a situation where it's a democracy and the rules have been established before the game, and the rules say that after 7 years, you leave, or after 14 years, you leave, you don't come back, and then you change the rules and make them unlimited, then the rules say if you are no longer available, you die, you're sick, you don't run again, let a different person come in. Let the rules run an election for a different person to come in. And then you change it again and say you are going to appoint the person who is coming in. It's not a monarchy. It's a constitutional democracy. Is there not a problem right there?
Yes and no, because if people have voted into something and it's been dialogued or discussed as a nation, then that is different. But when you have a small group of people deciding on what should be done, then I think when we do that, we are creating that savior syndrome, that I am almost indispensable or I am indispensable. Like when you start to see that there's nobody else who can ascend to the presidency, then I think we have a real problem. But when people have said, listen, let's have a succession plan. The reason we have a vice is because if something happens to the president, someone will be able to take on. And when then people change things or change the constitution in order to maintain their survival, I think that is where we are starting to shoot ourselves in the foot. And I think that is not healthy, because you have to realize that when people voted you in, just like they did with President Robert Gabriel Mugabe, he came in and he won massively, and we all celebrated, and rightly so. But you see, you have to see yourself as I am a gift for a season. I mean, look at people like President Kenneth Kaunda, President Madiba, Mandela. They knew that I am here for a season. And I think when you do that, you are creating a culture that says, I am not here forever. I am a gift to this nation for a season.
What did Zimbabweans miss before Robert Mugabe transformed his seasonal gift into a savior mentality or into an immortal person?
A lack of accountability. Because when a leader, let me say this with all respect, I have tremendous respect for what was happening. There was a time when President Mugabe would have the prime minister's question time before he became president, he would have a question time. He would be asked questions on any ministry in Zimbabwe, and he knew what was happening. And that was one of the most remarkable opportunities as a young man growing up in Zimbabwe. I was fascinated by that. He knew what was happening. And I think over a period of time, there needed to be some changes made, but at the same time, make sure that the people with me are also growing into these positions so that accountability is maintained. So I really think that there was need to move away from this concept, I'm indispensable and that nobody else can do it, because this is why we have vice presidents, and they need to have opportunities to take on. And I think there was also need to have a clear succession plan, knowing that I'm not here forever, and then empower the Constitution in such a way that the institutions within the country are able to remain neutral. For example, the police has to be neutral. The electoral process must remain neutral. The military is not for the ruling party. The military is for the nation. So when we start interfering with some of these realities, it really brings questions and fear and instability in the nation. So I really think that there were a number of things that could have been handled differently. And of course, you know, I'm not on the ground enough to actually be able to say, well, you know, I know exactly what is happening. But I think from history, these are some of the lessons that we could learn. And I think when someone knows, listen, I am a gift to my nation for a season. Because like I said, if you don't know where you're going, how do you know you've arrived? What are the things you can look back and actually say, we have done A, B, C, D. And listen, somebody else can take the baton beyond myself. And I have to be humble. Let me end with this, sir. We have to be humble. You know, I know there's the neatness of philosophy and messiness of reality. I have to say, I don't know everything, and there are other people who are better at this than me, so that I am investing in the lives of other people so that the nation, the interests of the nation are at heart, not my own interest. Because I think when we have personal interest getting in the way, and this is exactly what has happened in many of our African nations, leaders have ended up with personal interest driving and decaying the institutions, and that is not healthy.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pindu. Let's have Fabrice. No, before we have Fabrice, let's go to Dr. Nelson, then we'll come to Fabrice. Dr. Nelson Aluya, you've just heard Dr. Pindu say the problem Mugabe had was he switched from the visionary he was at the beginning into believing that he was indispensable for the nation, and personal interest overrode his vision for the country, and that brought the country to where it was before he left and where it is now. So, from your experience and your analysis of these issues across the continent, what do you think Cameroonians are missing? Because Cameroon is going down the way Zimbabwe went. And in Zimbabwe, the succession was not what Mugabe wanted, not what the people wanted, but at the end of the day, the Mugabe regime continued. So what are Cameroonians missing, and what should Cameroonians be correcting?
Well, I'll tell you by saying this. Let's look critically at the functions and capacities, intentions, actions, and deliverables of African leaders across the continent on a serial stage. First, we'll pick on Muammar Gaddafi. We know his trajectory. We know what he did, what his later life looked like, and eventually how he ended up. Initially, when he came, he was a boisterous young colonel who had a knack to rebuild the Arab regionalization and power. And that's why when he took the tool of his mentor, Abdel Nasser, to build that entity. But when Abdel Nasser died, that dream died with him. And he looked around and said, you know what do I do next? All right, fine. Let's look up to the rest of the Arab leaders and see where we can carry on that agenda. But nobody else would. Uh, they were all running their individual agenda, and then he got frustrated. And what did he do? He now looked towards sub-Saharan Africa and realized, listen, first, I'm African. Secondly, by all reasons, he's black. And that's why he pushed the African agenda. And we know what happened to him when he started pushing that African agenda. Now, let's look at Mugabe. Mugabe. When Mugabe ran, and he was the darling of the West, he was knighted, he was given all these accolades by the British Empire and Britain and all the other things, because you know what? Look, he was their darling boy. But by the time he woke up and realized what was happening to him and what was happening to his own people, he decided to take a turnaround. We know what happened to him, because now the narrative changed. Like you said, he initially had the interest of his people at heart, but then subsequently he turned. Who gave that narrative? Who turned that narrative to say he no longer cares about his people? No, when he began to care about his people and the trajectory and the direction where his people were going, he became the enemy of those who didn't like what he was doing. The same thing, look back on Kwame Nkrumah. Kwame Nkrumah, when he ran that agenda to protect his people, create plans and programs and infrastructures for his people, he no longer became who he was. And what happened? We see exactly what happened. He was dethroned. And you look at African leaders all through, and that's what truly has happened to them. The case in question was that of Nigeria again, when we had a magnanimous military ruler who, for some reason, decided to, carry out some nationalistic interests, build a Nigeria that would truly become self-reliant and subservient, not to anybody, but to itself and to its people. Guess what happened? He was shot off the street on his way to work. We know who that person is and who did it and by who and what reason. So if you look at, where we are to the present, Paul Kagame, we see what's happening in this country right now. He was supposed to run for 2 5-year term in 2000. By 2015, the agenda was changed. But guess what? The people in 2015 came together and said, you know what? This is what we want. He's done well. All right, fine. Let's give him 2 more 7 years. He done the 2 more 7 years. They're like, oh, no, it's not enough. Let's change it again. And they gave him 2 more 5 years. The last one was last year when he won by 90-something%. He's going to be in office to the year 2034. Again, we see what's happening. Now look at Cameroon. Cameroon has been in office. Cameroon president has been in office for only God knows how long. He's old. You and I know, as a medical doctor, I tell you, he can't function the way he ought to be. Even if he has the intention, he doesn't have the capacity or the strength to do that. And I'm sure his people do not even trust him. So if you look at the trajectory of all African leaders, not to talk about, the first one from Democratic Republic of Congo, and we know what happened to him, where he ended up. And even the first president of Benin Republic, what happened to him or where he ended up. We see that external forces that are influencing internal forces within the country. Now, look at, for instance, again, what happened to Burkina Faso, to the primary one who changed the country, what happened to him, where he ended up, and where, Captain Touare is looking right now. Now, if you look at contrast between Captain Touare and Cameroon, listen, people are making a fuss. The West, who don't like what he's doing, raising dust about him and all that. How much dust has been raised against the president of Cameroon? Who's making the allegations that he's suppressing his own people? There were wars in southern Cameroon. Nobody talked about it. Nobody said anything. The West didn't carry that press. The press of the West didn't carry those information and all that. But then we see what's happening in Burkina Faso. He's suppressing people. He's doing that. He's doing that. Because again, once you begin to talk about interest and show inclinations toward building your own country, then people raise issues against it. We know that. So the question now is this: what are we supposed to do? Who are the people? What's the narrative? And that's why platforms like this is great. Look, first and foremost, we must begin to get hold and control our own narratives. We talked about the three M's. I talked about it once. The three M's of racial dominance. For any race to dominate itself, you must control the three M's, what I call money, media, and the military. Money we don't have, we can't control. We're 243 years behind. We need the money to buy our military. We don't have that. Now, the only thing we have access to is the media. Now, the media is the narrative that has been used for decades to control our people. My brother talked about informed citizens, access to information. If you look at the African globally, the literacy rate globally is about 88%. The US is 79%. Africa itself is about 62%. Nigeria is 60 to 70%. Chad, above Nigeria, is about 35. Nigeria is about 31. Cameroon is 78. So the literacy, there are literate people in Cameroon. They're very educated. But the problem is, what are those factors that has hijacked Cameroon governance to the point where the people cannot come up and say any single thing? What are those pointers? Look at them. Who are the people controlling the narratives against Cameroon? And not just Cameroon, but against other African countries. So that's what we'll begin to look at. So what does that entail? As a people, we must understand what we want for ourselves. Let's say Rwanda chose for themselves, because out of the pain and the ashes of decadence and death, they came up with what they have. Does that mean democracy, the only thing that would govern any country? Not necessarily. If you look at Singapore and all those other countries that people refer to today, as we sing in the praise of Rwanda, he's become a dictator, and most of them have become dictators, right? But guess what? They're good dictators. We need people who truly value the country, respect the citizens, and see the country for themselves as a part of the country, not kowtowing with the mandates and the doctrines that was written for them by their colonial masters. And that's what's been happening.
Yes, Dr. Aluya, at this point, Fabrice had mentioned that citizens of Cameroon, in the face of what is happening, the transition that is upcoming, need to be informed, they need to mobilize, and they need to collectivize their actions. And you said Africans now, in the case of Cameroon, they need money, they need the media, and they need the military. You've said we don't have the money, but the media is what we can explore at the current moment. How do you think this should be explored for Cameroonians to be aware? Because you've made the case that education, literacy has not equated to understanding the situation on the ground. And if you don't understand the situation, you don't understand what and how to do it, you're going to remain where you are. So what should Cameroonians be doing?
And I'll tell you, we must look at, and I think I did say something like this previously in another platform, or maybe this platform a week or two ago. To address our issues, we must look at what I call two prongs. One, internal reconciliation and strategy formation. That's the first prong. The second one is external affiliation and association. And what do I mean by that? Meaning in each and every one of our continent and in our different countries, we have issues within us that we must address. So we must reconcile our issues. What is the dichotomy and the problem within the Anglophone and the Francophone component of Cameroon? What are the issues that are biting from each and one of them to resolve the issue? Because if you don't do that, the North and the South, or the Francophone, Anglophone will never come together and have a common sense. There are brilliant people within those segments of the country that love their country, but it will not be done. So until that resolve those issues, then they can begin to strategize. And strategize on the path forward. What is it that they want for themselves as a people? But I'll say this, the people who will do that, and I often say this quote, that change often comes, but by the determined will of a selected determined will people. Change often comes by the determined will of a selected few. So it is not the whole of Cameroonians, North or South, or of Africa, or Francophone, that will do the job. It's a few who are determined, who selected themselves to do their job. And within them, they must create champions. Look, what happened in France, to the detriment of the monarchy, to what happened in Russia and the socialist Bolsheviks and everything, even here in the United States, that led to the independence of the country from Britain. It was a few determined people who came together to do what the needful is needed. And that's what Cameroonians must find themselves within the continent, within Africa, within the country, and in the diaspora. And the diaspora can be the spark to doing that because they have the knowledge, the wherewithal, the skills, the knowledge, and the ability to organize. And to some reason, the ability to raise funds and raise money. Until you begin to do that, you can't. And then when they resolve their internal issues and the affiliations or strifes, then they begin to strategize. And strategize for what? What I call the second pro, as affiliation association, meaning if Cameroon falls, either Gabon or Nigeria falls as well. What affects Nigeria or Chad or Cameroon or Gabon or anybody around them affects Cameroon as well. So whatever affects Cameroon affects the neighbors as well. And not just Cameroon, but the continent itself. These individuals who become champions must look for those individuals who are affiliated to them, meaning their pain is my pain, your pain is my pain, and my pain is your pain, and begin to find ways to raise money, coalesce, organize, and carry out definite, actionable, sustainable, and reproducible plan, not just for today, but for the future. Now, the association is this. You look for those whose interest is also your interest. Look, if you need help from China to do what they need to do because either Britain or France is not letting Cameroon to move forward, then you associate with them and give them what they want. You get what you want as well. If it's America that has the interest now that says, you know what, you need to speak to those individuals and say, you know what, look, if it's mines in my country you want, but I need to create structures that will make our people and bring reasonable, knowledgeable leaders into power, then fine, you strike a deal with them. You create that association and you begin to negotiate. And I'm sorry, I'm going to say this for those who are Christians. Under special condition, the devil can see God. Because you negotiate, period. Until you begin to do that, it's impossible for you to arrange and address the issues that concerns you. And that's why I look at it. And that's what must be done.
It's always fascinating listening to you and hearing under certain circumstances the devil can see God. Anyway, we can always fix those problems. Thank you so much. Fabrice, let me have you here. There is a pending question from Dr. Mpindu for you to clarify your succession theory around here. But Dr. Aluya has just said change comes by the determined will of a select few. So Cameroon is facing an impending problem, the transition, succession, whatsoever. Do you see that there is a select few in Cameroon who have determined that positive change must come during that period, or is it going to be business as usual? Is Fabrice on? Looks like we lost Fabrice. Yeah, we lost Fabrice. Anyway, let me have Dr. Mpindu back on stage and to discuss this. Let's touch on this question that Dr. Aluya has just raised. He said change comes by the determined will of a select few. And going back to the 2008 scenario in Zimbabwe, the people did not necessarily want the Mugabe regime to continue. Mugabe himself wanted his wife to take over, but then it ended up with the current president, Mangwangana, taking over, and that is the extension of the Mugabe regime. Did Zimbabweans lack the select few with a determined mind to bring that change?
Dr. Bernard, Dr. Aluya is such an insightful leader. I mean, he mentioned quite a number of things that just got me thinking. He's very insightful, and I really appreciate that. It's good to have guys like him on the team. I really think that we have to continue to sharpen our analytical skills as Africans, being able to look at our situations and find out how come we think this way, how come we do things this way. Because I think if we don't question how we do things and how we have arrived at where we are continuing to basically, maintain the status quo, and we don't want that. Now, I was actually going to ask him that question as well, because when we talk about a select few, is this self-appointed select few, or is this people who have been chosen by the people? Because I think there is a difference. You can have a select few who want to maintain the status quo because they are benefiting from the system. So they would choose among themselves so that they maintain these goodies that they are enjoying. Or you can engage the people, the public, to actually say, let's come up, and this is why I really believe that we have to define our own democracy in Africa and not have the Western idea of democracy run wild in Africa as if that's the only way of looking at things. Because if we have a system that says, okay, let's select people, men and women, by the way, men and women who are able to guide our nation in terms of next steps, I think that will do us a lot of good. I'm also saying this because I am fascinated by governments where we have ministers who don't have credentials in a particular discipline or particular area, become minister of this, and next time they are minister of that, and the next time they are minister of that. And you ask yourself, are they so multi-talented, multifaceted leaders who can lead any ministry, or is it really based on merit? Because I think if we have a select few who may not have the interest of the people at heart, then you will end up with a situation that is very, very dysfunctional. And I think that Dr. Aluya has a good point, because not everybody is able to make a statement with regards to what really matters. But I think when you have a select few who have ideas on what could be discussed, then bring those to the people so that the people can vote, they can decide for themselves. Like I said earlier, it cannot be by popular vote. It has to be based on character of the leaders and their interest in terms of where they want to take the nation. Now, I know that sometimes, when people are campaigning, they give us all the sweet nothings, and they tell you what they're going to do, and it never happens. So I think it is important that even when they have their presentations and dialogues, if they have public dialogues, that the populace would be involved, that they can also ask questions and have those questions be disseminated across the nation. I liked one of the comments that, or rather, Fabrice mentioned, and I think even along what Dr. Nelson mentioned, let's use the media. Let's use the digital tools we have to spread information about educating our people. Many people in most of our African nations have cell phones now. And sometimes I wonder, how can we tap into making use of dissemination of information to the people so that they know what is really going on, so that when they vote, they are well informed? Because even though some of the nations may have a low literacy percentage, but I think by and large, we have people who are highly educated in Africa who would be able to know the difference between a good leader and a right leader, and have the use of the media or the digital tools to actually inform our people and educate them.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pindu. Let me go straight to Dr. Nelson to clarify what Dr. Pindu wants to hear.
Yeah, sorry, I muted myself. So your question was in regards to who the selected few are, or what? How do we pull that together? Look, and I say this: if evil people know how to organize themselves to do evil, it's about time that good people also learn to organize themselves to do good. Period. How can we continue to sit down and fold our arms when good people sit down and they call themselves good? People wake up and plan, you know, hostile takeover of events. People plan to do some terrible things, you know, and they organize themselves to do it. It's about time good people organize themselves to do it as well. Why are they afraid? You know, and if they plan to do that, then they must also have an agenda and cross their T's and dot all their I's to be able to do that. They must truly be interested in the values and the principles by which they believe in, and the value and the respect for the people and for their country. Because everybody complains. They complain that things are not good. Or people are complaining, you know, Tinubu is doing that, Paul Biya is doing that, and all that. How many people have lifted their hand to do anything about it? None. What's your contribution to improving the lot of the people of the average citizen? And I'm sorry, and I'll be very frank with you. A lot of our people are not sincere. They are not. They just go out and scream and yell and whatever. But the time they get to their turn, they're doing the same thing too, because they're following a script. Whose script? I don't know. You know, they just follow that. I mean, we have people who in the diaspora who come and run for office, or see when, you know, government officials come to, you know, abroad, the US or Britain and all that, and they're running after them and looking for ways to have engage them so that they can have audience with them. What are they doing that for? And these are the same people who write continuously against them every day in the papers and on platforms. They are very good, you know, table analysts and intellectuals. But when they truly have to put their words into action, they're missing. If you call most Nigerians or Cameroonians or Ghanaians or who live outside the country and say, you know what, donate $1 every month, $1 every month towards a certain cause, so that 50,000 of you who live in the diaspora, or 100,000 of you who live in the diaspora, $1 every month to put together to support somebody who's going to run for office. No, they won't do that. And then you see them start for giving excuses. You understand? I've seen that multiple times. So for those who must organize, this is my advice. Look at their pedigree. What have they done in the community where they live to create change? Who have they pulled together? How have they organized themselves within the diaspora where they are? What have they done to prove that they have the capacity and the trust you can carry on them? Period. Those are the things you need to look out for. Until they begin to do that, forget it. You're wasting your time. And that's why people often come together. You see people gather themselves like, oh, we know to do this now. Let's form this diaspora organization. Let's do this and do. At the end, if there's a way, even for those who have good interests and really want to do something. But if you find individuals who would want to support because they're always looking for what they'll get out of it, and by the time they go in there and they don't see something out of it, guess what? They turn around. By the time you ask them to, okay, donate money, they don't. And even in our communities and in the diaspora, those asking you for money to donate, what is their pedigree? What have they done? Where are they? Are they those who you can trust with your money? What have they done on the ground, in the country, in the continent where they live, and in the countries that they are seeking to change, to create change? Are they willing to go back to roll up their sleeves and truly even sacrifice ultimately for the country? Those are questions we must begin to ask. Until you find those group of people collectively who do that, we're still wasting our time, honestly. And that's why a lot of people get despondent and they're like, oh, I've tried, I've done this, I've done that, and done that. Nothing comes out of it because you do it with the same group of people who are not on the same wavelength with you. If they're not on the same wavelength with you, you're going to waste your time, honestly. So if you must organize, look for people who genuinely have the interest and on the same wavelength with you. Like they said, best of the same feather congregate together. Look at those who will fly with you in the times of peace, in the times of storm, in the times of chaos. Those are people you need to fly with.
Thank you, Dr. Aluya. And that sounds like a message that Fabrice needs to hear, because Cameroon is at a time when people who are minded like Fabrice, who want to see change and who are working for change, really need to start congregating and associating themselves with people who have a vision, people who can plan, people who can project and put things together. But before that, Fabrice, Dr. Mpindu wanted to hear from you what you meant by succession in Cameroon.
Please come back with a question again.
Dr. Mpindu wanted to hear from you why you are against succession in Cameroon.
Yeah, succession is not the word for a country that is supposed to practice democracy. Every country have the right to define the form and kind of government that they want to live in. And I think that Cameroon in the 90s, like many other African countries, choose democracy. And I agree with those who define this as the form of government. Morocco is a monarchy, a constitutional monarchy with a king from Hassan to Mohammed VI. And Morocco is doing well because they did not dismantle their own monarchy. Egypt was in a monarchy before. It was dismantled to a presidential system. Libya too, you know. But every country, we have a lot of monarchies in Africa. Some are doing well, some not. And we also have democracy. Some are doing well, some not. So every country should have that freedom, free will to choose what kind of government they want to live in. And I think a lot of people fought in Cameroon, even at the time of independence, to want to live in a democracy. And we said, yes, this is the kind of government we want to live in. But now you cannot say you want to live in democracy and you're actually practicing monarchy. Succession is for monarchical governments. Succession is for monarchies. It's for established kingdoms. It's for established royalty, where you know that when the king or the queen dies, based on established rules of succession, the next person in line follows. Not democracies. It's as clear as that. It's as clear as that. So the issue of organizing the procedure for someone to take power and then you call it succession and holding another person to continue from where the leader stopped, for me, that's not right. And in Cameroon, the constitution is clear about how the procedure and the steps to take when the current president is not capable of leading the country. Now, if you're telling me about succession within the political party in power, that is understandable. There, I agree with you totally that every political party should prepare the person that would take over from the chairman or from the leader that is currently their favorite. That it's a very clear one. Everybody knows that, because within political parties, there should be continuity. So if the leader, the chairman, the president of that party is no longer able to lead or to rule, there should be someone that can continue, can still carry the vision of that political party. Within an institution, within an organization, that is a different rule, and that is a different internal rules and regulation. But now, for the national level, for the presidency, it's a whole different thing, because the presidency is not the political party stuff. And that is why we have to distinguish between political parties and state institutions. The problem in Cameroon is that the party in power has been for so long that it's now state party. And then people are confusing chairmanship of the party and president of the republic. These are two distinct positions and should be made clear. People must be informed about this. People must know the difference, you know. So if the president of the CBDM political party wants to arrange for succession within the CBDM party, it is his right to do so. This is correct. He has the right to do so. When Justice Aya was living in PAP, he arranged for someone that could take over when he's not dead. I mean, I also train young people who can take over from our future movement as I'm unable to lead or I'm not there to lead. This is normal in every organization because even businesses need to survive after the leader is not there. I agree with that vision of continuity, but this should not be a national project because you can't impose the leader that you have appointed to succeed you in your party to become the national president, undermining the procedure of the constitution. You understand? So this is what I want him to understand, and I'm making clear.
Yeah, but now there is the constitutional amendment in April 2026 that made provisions for the president to appoint a vice president who succeeds him. Do you think that is a problem at all?
I still say that there is no provision, even with the amendment, which stipulates that the aspect of Article 6.4.3 sub 3 and sub 4 has not been revoked. So even if Cameroon is to run the vice presidential system as is established and amended, it doesn't remove the aspect of organizing election. It simply means that by the time that the president is not capable of performing his function, the vice president takes over. But the vice president takes over to organize elections. So the vice president is going to play the interim role of the president of the Constitutional Council. So the vice president simply takes the interim role of the Constitutional Council president that he was supposed to rule, and not that he is supposed to govern for the rest of the mandate of the president. These are things that Cameroonians don't know.
I think we'll need to clarify about that. But before then, let me see if we can have you again. Paul Biya was out of the country. He spent almost 80 days abroad, and he returned. Upon his return, he did not have any audiences at the airport as usual. Cameroonians only saw him wave out of his tinted glass in the presidential limousine. But yesterday, they saw him at the presidency receiving the Lionesses who won the Women's African Cup of Nations. Are Cameroonians concerned that Paul Biya is not strong enough to rule the country?
Not only Cameroonians, everybody around the world. I mean, recent events from 2022 has shown the president to be in the state of incapacity. So that's not even an issue of debate. You know, someone above 80 years in his 90s, when you've spent 8 to 9 decades on earth, you don't have that mental capacity to produce knowledge when you are in your 40s, 50s, and 60s. Yeah. So it's a human phenomenon that people have a life cycle. You know, life is a cycle from growth to old age. So there is a certain age where someone do not have that capacity to govern again. And I still come back to say this. If we were in a monarchy where it is established that the leader or the ruler have to die before another person takes over, it is understandable. But we can't be in a system where we say it's a democracy. And it means that the president have defined functions and have to preside over meetings. Because even in monarchies, at a certain age, the monarchical right of the king to rule is being transferred to a council or a particular person, while the person is no more capable of attending strenuous meetings, reading and proofreading documents, going into the ground to see people. I mean, these are factual things. But
these issues have been litigated and re-litigated in the media. But the question I have is, Cameroonians, both opposition parties, religious groups, civil society organizations, diaspora, know all these, but it keeps perpetuating. Why is it so difficult for Cameroonians to constitute themselves to say stop to this abuse of power?
Well, you know, it's a very diversified country from 2 colonial heritage powers, but before that, I mean 3 even, because Cameroon has a little bit of the most complicated history in Africa that sometimes is tough to explain to someone who is not from this context to understand where we are coming from. I was having a conversation with a fellow African from the East African zone when I said, well, I can't communicate with my own brother from the same country with a local language because we just use English and French as official languages and we don't have a local national language. You know, that's already a serious problem. And then someone who is coming from a country where they use a national language will have difficulties in understanding you and where you're coming from. So the diversity has been exploited negatively instead of positively, because it's been exploited in the sense of divide the people to better rule and conserve power instead of as a potentiality to explain the the Africa in miniature aspect of the country, because if the diversity of Cameroon was used for the Africa in miniature aspect, I mean, we will be one of the most unique. We are one of the most unique country, but the diversity aspect has been exploited politically negative to keep the people divided, to say there should be continuous mutual distrust, fear and suspicion that exists between communities, between people, between the different ethnic groups and different parts of the country. And you have to understand that this aspect of uniting, coming together, making synergy, having a collective force and collective effort, it is a process that doesn't happen in a day, a process that doesn't happen in a decade. It is a process. And I do think this process comes to maturity at a particular time. And some countries take up to 50 years before they see change, others up to a century. And Cameroon's case is one of those spectacular cases that we are looking up to that day that the people will come to the maturity, that's time of clarity, that there is absolute need for the civic forces to merge energy together, because it's not about an individual. No matter how smart and intelligent I am, I can't do it alone. We need to do it as a collective. We need to carry out these actions as a collective, strategically collective, in order to obtain the necessary change. Cameroon is a...
Do you see any signs that those in the civil, that is those who are not in the government or those who are working for democratic stability, are interested in putting forces together?
There's always that. I think we should not underestimate the capacity of initiatives that is being carried out to try to bring together energy for the purpose of change. In 2018 presidential elections, we saw that effort where a lot of forces came together to support a candidate, and we saw the results were stolen. In 2025, similar thing. In 1992, it was similar thing. So it's not as if Cameroonians are not always coming together. You know, there is always that, you know, that attempt. There's always that try to come together, to bring forces together, and it's working. It's working. It's just a matter of that point that their energy will be strong enough in order to cause that change that is most needed. Even at the time of multi-party politics, the All Anglophone Conference was as a result of collective initiative, and it worked. People came out with a resolution, and the resolution was taken to cause the drafting of a new constitution. So I wouldn't say that they are not always coming together or they are always divided. I wouldn't say that. I would say that the state is rather strategic enough to divide them to the extent that their own effort of coming together is not surpassing the state's own effort of dividing the people. So it's a matter of power play, because between two forces, those who are in government having a monopoly and violence over the people and having all the strategic and international partners on their side, and then the civil society and political opposition parties that rely only on the population in order to have support and then cause departure of the government they want to change. There is resource aspect, there is the will aspect, there is the information aspect, there is the sensitization aspect, there's political education aspect, and we know that the level of political education between the two education systems in the country is not the same. And this is causing imbalance, because there are things that the people of the French-speaking part of the country are realizing in 2025 that the people of the English-speaking part realized in 2015. So, you know, there is consciousness difference. In like some part of the country are realizing certain things a decade later, and another part is realizing it. So, you know, that's complexity in trying to understand the kind of society that the people of Cameroon want to design. It's all what is at stake, and it's all what people need at this point in time to know, to understand, and to take action about it. I believe that we are making progress on how to cause change, and it's effectively coming. I mean, God has not forgotten the people of Cameroon.
Thank you so much, Fabrice. We're going to switch over to discuss or to look at the international consequences, especially on the reputation of African countries when governments manage the African countries in the manners that we have just discussed. But before then, Martin, can you give us a teaser for this week's interview?
If you are an accountant and then suddenly you land in America or wherever you are and someone tells you, you better get into nursing. People expect that, not people, they get this information that getting into nursing or getting into the healthcare system is where the jobs really are, not realizing that, oh, even if you are an accountant in your country, even if you were a lawyer, there are pathways for you to go ahead and do that. There are organizations dedicated to helping immigrants continue with their previous careers in America. Imagine if you are an accountant and then suddenly you land in America or wherever you are and someone tells you, you better get into nursing, be a doctor, go be this. And you probably are not that kind of person. How is your life going to be once you do whatever nursing? It means for the rest of your life, you're going to be a miserable nurse.
That is the interview this week with a career coach who understands what transition looks like in a new country. So, but last week, Ghana's foreign minister said in Russia on a state visit by the Ghanaian government to the Russian government that the international system is rigged against Africa. And he explained that African countries obtain loans at very expensive rates on the international market. Martin, give us that video.
The development of Africa. We cannot continue with this world order. Linked to our demand for a new world order, the international financial system is rigged against the global south. High risk, high interest, high capital, which is very expensive and continues to militate against the development of Africa. We cannot continue with this world order. And that's why we are demanding that the global financial architecture changes. If you look at the sovereign rating agencies, how they treat African economies, the kind of reports and how they make it risky to invest in Africa, that is what leads to the high interest rate. And you're seeing a lot of African countries spending sometimes 40%, 50% of all national revenue just on servicing debts, on interest payments. How can you develop? How can you catch up, in this rigged world order?
This is going to be our last segment, and I'll invite the guests to comment on this, but from the angle that African governments, when you rule or you manage your country poorly, the effects are going to go international. We are not discounting the international effects or the international mechanics or geopolitics around international lending, international finance, international economics. But when corruption is rampant, the courts cannot be trusted. The money is borrowed and not invested. Projects are never ending. Should the international lending bodies or foreign direct investors consider Africa to be viable enough for their investments and for loans? Let's start with Dr. Francis Mpindu.
Thank you, Dr. Bernard. I really appreciate the comments that came from our brother from Ghana, but I also put that within the context of this reality, and I learned this while I worked with my brothers and sisters, Native Canadians in Northern Canada. They say that people who are corrupt, they have learned corruption from the colonizers. And I think there is truth in that, because certain things have been created for people to be able to get or gain what they want if they meet certain requirements. And so when they realize that when they are about to meet the requirements, the goalposts are moved, people come up with creative ways. I would call it creative ways, but some of them are not really creative because they are actually like shooting ourselves in the foot. And so people come up with shrewd ways of being able to get what they want. Now, let me make a comment with regards to us demanding the financial gurus and the systems in place. I don't think we need to demand. I think we need to put ourselves together And I think this is why Professor Lumumba, Patrice Lumumba, has said very wisely, we need to come together as Africa so that it's not Ghana that is fighting anybody. It's not Lesotho that's fighting anybody. It's not South Africa and Zimbabwe and Zambia and Nigeria that is standing up against these big giants. But it is Africa coming together. So this is why I really like us at some point to talk about what is happening with the African Union, because there are some fights that ought to take place from a united front than just individual countries. Now, I sympathize with our brother from Ghana going, making these statements, and he's right. But I don't think we need permission from other people to be able to write our own narrative. Let's highlight the issues. What are the issues? Like he talks about the high risks, he talks about high debt, he talks about high capital, or those are realities. But what are we going to do about it? We cannot continue, and I reiterate, we cannot continue to blame other people for our own situation. We're talking about Cameroon. They've been independent for the last 66 years. You cannot tell us that with a population that is 70% of the population, 70% of the population is under 35, and you're telling me that we don't have people to come together and actually say enough is enough? And
that is why when you said we need to fight as a united continent. But I want to use the example of Cameroon, for example, that I know. Some Cameroonians in the diaspora want to invest at home with their own money. But whenever they show their heads there that they want to invest, the government officials want to suck them dry. And the money that should have gone to investment is rather directed to private pockets. That is why people don't go back to invest. If they let people invest at home, maybe they will not need the foreign investors as much.
Dr. Ngalim, I'm going to say this. I really liked the comment that was made by our brother earlier, Dr. Aluya. He said you need the 3 M's, the money, the media, and the military. I would take the military out. We don't need the military. We need a mindset that thinks African, that has the values of the people at heart, that has the high principles and professionalism at heart, because without money, without the use of money, the use of the media, and the use of a mindset that is African in its principles, we are going to be in this cyclical mode where we keep going in circles over and over again. And of course, we know that is a definition of insanity. We keep doing the same thing and expect different results. So, Dr. Aluya, take the military out. Let's put a mindset that is African.
Thank you so much. Let me go over to Fabrice. Fabrice, what is your take on Ghana's foreign minister's statement in Russia?
Well, I would say Ghana is one of that African country I have a lot of respect for. It's one of that African country that I read documentary about its leaders from independence till date. I could give you an account of the leadership style of the first president right up to the current president, because I take a lot of interest to follow the politics of Ghana. And I would say this is a country that teaches a lot to African and other African countries about what it takes to make democracy work, to make leadership transformational, and to try in your own small way to contribute to uniting the continent. That said, I would say his statements is correct, but with a lot of nuance. At this stage, for me, at this stage and this moment in the life of the African continent, we must be the reference of our own development. We must be the reference of our own development and put aside anything that keeps us in the state of lamentation about the historical past. Because lamentations have never really driven a people, a continent, or a country forward. Now, if you were to seek for reparations, there is a lot of factors that is going to be put on the table about what happened, who is responsible, who is supposed to do what, and so on. But if you were able to convince and bring together majority of the African governments and leadership in the African Union to be able to understand that working in the same direction, having unity, having purpose and vision to defining the narrative of Africa as a bloc, as a continent, not having this kind of Africa Russia summit, Africa France summit, Africa US summit, but having a kind of continent to continent discussion, country to country discussion, having a purpose of vision and making the leadership of each country the reference of Africa development. And that's why I say somehow Ghana have that alacrity, have that capacity to say so, because they try to define leadership from what they practice in their own country. 4 years, a president comes, define his policy, pursue the policy, try to see what they do. They don't attempt to modify constitution to stay indefinitely in power. They try as much to, implement some of the policies, the campaign on during their campaign. I mean, based on these basics, you can say that you have that moral authority to give lesson to other people. So for me, I do think Africa should be the reference of their own development. And Ghana is on the track for that, and they have that moral authority to try to give lessons to other African countries.
Thank you. Let's have Dr. Aluya. And Dr. Aluya's question is from a viewer who says, if a president leaves his country and spends 83 days abroad, and in that same country, the transition is not clearly defined, meaning nobody knows what can happen if Paul Biya dies tomorrow, should investors invest in that country without being afraid?
That's a question for me, or it's in continuation with what the Ghanaian foreign minister talked about. I mean, I'll put all of them in the same, quadrant. I always say this. Look, let's not deceive ourselves. The question is this: Africans and Africans everywhere, anytime, and all those of African descent must truly come together to form a united front that's alluded to, and understand that, listen, we must economically be buoyant, and economics should be our primary aim. And I said it before, that what our forefathers came together in the late 1940s and organized themselves in spite of the persecution, in spite of distance, in spite of loss of money, to create, to give to us that we enjoy today, is political freedom. What this generation must fight for, again, not just associating, but collaborating. And when I mean collaborate, you mean you bring your time, your money, and your intellect. Like I said before, some of us have the time or the money or the intellect. Some of us don't have the money. Some of us have the intellect, we don't have the money or the time. Some of us have the time, we don't have the intellect or the money. So, but in this new fight, whatever you have, bring it on the table. Because it was done before. That's what they did in the 1940s, late 1940s, transpired and happened to every Black person on earth, whether you're Japanese Black, Cameroonian Black, Caribbean Black, or African Black, or Ghanaian Black. Something happened to us. It was political freedom. Today, we're asking for economic liberation. There's a difference between freedom and liberation, but that's we can talk in another space. Now, what, like you said before, and I alluded to, was the money first. We must go through the money. Because the Chinese did that. What they realized is what? They went after the money. And they built their economic structure, and they're building their political, their military structure. And you see that because they need the military to defend their money. And you see what they're doing with media, Huawei, TikTok, and all that. And the technology that control all of those. And that's how they see. So if we as a people, what I mean as a people, Black, and everybody who are of black descent must do that. Then we must go after the money. But in doing that, we must understand there are people who are the roadblocks, who are steadfastly ensuring that we have no access to that. And they're all over Africa. Look at the mines, look at the trade and all those things. Those guys, they look, in 1884 and 1885, when they sat down to divide Africa, no other continent was sat, the Europeans or anybody else did not sit to divide any other continent on earth, except Africa. And that has led us to 54 countries. And thank God with 51, as we see now in the diaspora. Because guess what? And when you talk about voting on another level, China, 1.4 billion people have one vote, security vote. You know how powerful that is. India, 1.4, 1.45 also have one vote. And that's a number. Africa is what, 1.5 to 1.6 now? How many votes do we have? What's the talk? How can we talk in one voice? So when we look at all of this, you can scream and shout and say, oh, Africa must come together. Look, the structure, the fundamental structure to create that, which will give us that one unitary voice, was constantly created and thwarted. Constantly. They do not want us to achieve that economic prowess. We must realize this. It's going on every day. So let me finish now, and I'll end up with this. Because we do that, there will never, that external factors will always be there. But when you have leaders who are what I call knowledgeable leaders, who must now come and down, and like I alluded, internal reconciliation and strategy formation, because they'll always look for ways to create division between you. Like my brother said, the North and the South, the Anglophone, they don't speak one language. And I talked, I'm not sure if it was there, internal reconciliation and then strategy formation. Because Ghana is doing that. They're speaking right now. And that's what we begin to hear. Look, let me tell you this. No African, no black man on earth will be respected the day the African is respected. And I'll say it again. No black person on earth will be respected on the day the African is respected. Whether you're black, Japanese black, Brazilian black, Ghanaian, Grenadian black, or Dominican black, or Cameroonian black, anywhere, any day, anytime on earth. You know why? Because they'll always look at you to the periscope of Africa. And Africa has been denigrated consistently. They do that. Because I'll tell you this. Look, a group of people till today sit down and systematically created a process that will not see you grow. You must first of all recognize that. And I'll tell you this, and that's why you see Vietnamese look down on blacks. Indians look down on black, Chinese look down on black, every other race look down on anything that's black. It's appalling, for God's sake. It's a design. Let's not remove ourselves. We can scream and shout, oh, let's come together, until we begin to look at those things first and resolve those issues. Yes, then we begin to talk. And like I said before, they did it in the 1960s. This generation, with technology, we must begin to do it again. But before we do that, we must recognize, like, listen, everything is about economics. Economics, everything. Look, the people who do not want you to succeed, they don't care about your politics. They don't even care about their own country's politics. Look at Europe, they're fighting today. What do you think they are fighting over? Because the conglomerates who organize themselves to do this, they transcend beyond what? Political prowess. They transcend beyond president, prime ministers, anywhere in the world. They are the ones who sit down to organize this. And like I always say, when I speak of data. You need to start gathering this data. The economics we're talking about will begin with trade. Look at the trade. What's the contribution of Africa on the global trade? 3%. 3. It went up to 5%, in 2023, and it's down now to 3%. What's the trade within African continent? 15%. Look, for any continent to be globally relevant, you must trade among yourself up to 45%. Look at how the Europeans trade. Even the Americas, 45 to 50, 60% within the American continent. Europe, 60 to 65. Asia, about 65 to 70%. That's the trade that each continent have. So EU, when they knew they were losing their power, what did they do? They meaning European countries, they organized and created EU, not just for the political or the military strength, but for economics as well. So if we as a people, the continent of Africa, must get to a point where we're political, not just political relevant, but economically and globally relevant, we must begin to trade ourselves within ourselves up to a level of 45%. We're 15 now, and that's why the African Free Continental Trade is the first step in the right direction for us. Now, I'll close by this. How many of us listening, and even our brothers and sisters here, how many of them know what the Agenda Africa 63 means? How many of us know that? Who is narrating that? And I think that is a topic we must discuss on this platform one of these days, so that we know the narrative, the structure that our fathers who were brilliant sat to talk about us, to propose a future, not just for you today, but for our children and children's children that are going to come, on climate change, on economics, on health, on all that. How many of us know all those things? You understand? So, but understanding, I'll submit by saying this, understanding all of this, that is all the economics. And I alluded to it before. We must learn to negotiate. We have to. We don't have the powers. We don't have the strength. We have to negotiate our strength towards that. And I'll tell you why. India recently was very poor, the poorest continent, country on earth, the poverty capital of the world. What did they do a few years ago? They opened up. They opened up to everybody, trade, everything came up. They removed the restrictions that allowed trade. Back in the days in India, if you want to have a telephone, you put the application, it takes you 4 to 5 years to get a telephone line. But today, things are different. So we must begin to look at that and look at individuals, leaders who are knowledgeable, to understand that the restrictions that are limiting us, especially on economics, must be removed, including those who are leaders who are who are impedance to our progress. We must
Thank you so
out.
much. Thank you so much, Dr. Aluya. It flows with you and it flows with wisdom all the time. And I'm seeing guest viewers here saying they love what you're saying, and it's always enticing and inspirational. And I think it was an excellent panel today, diagnosing issues across the continent, from Cameroon to Nigeria to Zimbabwe to Ghana, learning from one another, developing lessons, and learning how to be one continent, one people, one voice, but with specificities that we need to resolve at the micro level. With this, I leave you with one voice, with one message, and that came from Dr. Aluya. Change comes by the determined will of a select few. Change comes by a determined will of a select few. That is a call to action for you watching now to decide whether you want to be changed. And if you want to be changed, then you first of all need to engage in doing that change. That is the only way you'll see change come to your country. For Africa's Uncomfortable Questions, I have been Ngalim Bernard, and my guests have been Dr. Nelson Aluya, Dr. Francis Mpindu, and Mr. Lena Fabrice. All we discuss about Cameroon. See you in the next episode of Africa's Uncomfortable Questions, and that is next Sunday, same platforms, same time, insightful guests, and of course, me, your humble servant, as the host, and Botang Records as the techniques. Bye-bye and see you next week.